Hi, I'm William Mills. I'm here at Finovate Spring in San Francisco, and I'm pleased to be joined by Iverson Comelo. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for interviewing me.
Oh, it's great to see you again. And you are the founder of MoneyMaps. Is that
That's
correct?
right. Yep.
So for the folks that aren't here at Finovate Spring, tell us about yourself and the work you do at MoneyMaps.
Yeah, so we're basically trying to help provide financial advice to folks that aren't traditionally able to afford it.
Right.
I've been doing this for about 15 years, like we
Right.
talked about. And the basic concept is, how do we embed that for fintechs, for financial institutions? How do we give them a behavioral approach to actually getting people to do the things that we know they want to do
Right.
around their personal finances? But this idea of the intention action gap, right? We intend to do things around our money, but because personal finance is high friction,
Right.
how do we actually build some behavioral interventions that actually get them, or at least increase the likelihood that they're going to do those things?
That makes a lot of sense. So how and why was the company formed?
Yeah, so we had been doing like financial wellness for employers, and I have a quarterly check-in with a friend of mine who covers banking for Oliver Wyman, Dennis Chira, and he was saying, we're working with a lot of banks and financial institutions, and they're trying to figure out, like, how do we transition our workforce that's traditionally been promoting product to actually building relationships, delivering empathy, trust at scale. Like, what are the mechanisms to do that? And so he's like, hey man, why don't you just open up your API to
Right.
be able to allow these companies, they can embed what you've developed that's already in their platform,
Right.
and just allow them to turn on financial advice, human financial advice, but do it in a way that's highly scalable, that's asynchronous to start, but can lead to a live meeting. In the way that all the presentations today were really very focused on, like, you've got this younger demographic that's very digital, and they want to be able to interact in these ways.
Well, one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that money and finance is a lot about the transaction. And it sounds like what you guys are helping to transform a digital transaction to a digital relationship. And if so, how?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's really around helping people identify their financial goals and using the intrinsic motivation they have to pay off debt, build savings, buy a home, buy a car, whatever it is, remodel their kitchen, whatever is important to them,
Right.
right? And actually help them with a plan that's very actionable, that's developed by a real person, that
Right.
they get follow-up messages around. And I think that is where trust is built. That's where relationships are built, when it's not a bot, but it's a real person, but a person working within a system that's highly scalable, so that they can work with thousands of people simultaneously, essentially.
So that leads to my next question. So how can a real life human financial advice platform help folks have an emotional connection and really build trust? As you are aware, there's a lot of mistrust
Right.
of financial institutions and technology.
Right.
So how does that help, and how can you scale it?
Well, I think traditionally banks and financial institutions have been really good at trust, right? Think of your community bank,
Right.
where they walk in, they know you. You walk in, right? And they know you, and you have a relationship with them, right?
Right.
And we've gotten away from that, partly because people are not going into branches as much, because that's not the model necessarily for, maybe it's
Right.
the model that large national banks aspire to, but it's probably not there yet. And so what we're trying to do is match people with somebody who's essentially their advocate, right? Is a fiduciary. The platform can either be adapted to institutions that have individuals that can provide this advice, or we can provide it ourselves and as CFPs on our platform. So like for a fintech company that maybe doesn't have any financial planners or advisors and doesn't want to hire any, we can provide that as part of our bundle, essentially. Or for a bank that has a bunch of people that can work with individuals, we can provide just the technology and they can provide the individuals. And so we can allow them to just use the technology to make the connections, to message, to have asynchronous conversations or live conversations, but maybe remotely, right?
Well, that's what we're seeing a lot of fintechs. How are fintechs thinking and doing things about human financial advice?
So I think a lot of them are thinking about, how do we get out of the vertical that we started in, right?
Right.
So if you're SoFi, it's student loans,
Right.
right? If you're public, it's investing.
Right.
If you're Betterment, it's investing. And so there's different ways people are thinking about their own customers, but they also recognize that they need to expand the service that they provide to those customers to build more stickiness, stronger relationships, and really ultimately primacy. I think a lot of the super app companies are thinking about this, where they have a lot of different solutions now, right, in the banking space, but how do they let people know about those and that
Right.
those may be appropriate for them based on where they're at and what they want to accomplish? And I think having a human advice interaction very efficiently, but still having a human in that process is what builds that trust over time, as opposed to a bot or some sort of automated solution.
So, there's all kinds of facets to the financial industry, whether it's payments, transactions, DDA, whatever. But how does personal financial advice, help grow engagement with the relationship with the customer?
I think where you can find out what's important to that person, like why do we work, right? Like if you sort of think it at a meta level, we work because there's certain things that we want to accomplish, right? And those things come up in a financial planning engagement, right? Like I want to be able to retire, or I want to be able to buy a home. These are things that drive behavior and motivation. And so if we can understand someone and what's really important to them, and then provide a plan, a roadmap, and then and ease that process for them, right? So we reduce some of the friction in the decision-making process, and we can point them to very specific solutions. Then that's where trust in a relationship is born, because someone's advocating for you to do the thing, to accomplish the thing that you really want to do. And I think that's important.
Well, Americans have always had a horrendous savings rate for the average American. It's just terrible, and I think it's actually getting worse.
Right.
I read an article recently about people who just say, I'm not going to worry about retirement, I just want to live now.
Right.
So what does that portend for everybody moving forward?
I think part of the reason people, and we've seen this I've seen this in products that I've worked on, is that goal that they have seems so far away that it's not even worth trying, right? Financial independence is just like, this is so out of my realm. But if you have somebody that you're working with, and you have some clear next steps, and that person is helping nudge you on the next thing that you need to work on, right?
Whether it's a house,
it's building $1,000 emergency savings, right? So you don't have to borrow that money and pay that, go deeper into debt. Regardless of what it is and where someone's at, I think if you can make that process, and this is where we worked with Dan Ariely at Duke University to actually build this whole behavioral intervention, where you can actually help people understand what they can work on next and then help them move forward, then you can take them from a mindset and an attitude where they feel deflated and actually induce confidence in that process. Tell them the things that they're doing right. And we know from research, the more confident people are, the more likely they are actually to accomplish their financial goals. And so that's really where we've focused on being able to use a series of behavioral strategies in concert that are going to make people more likely, even if they're low to moderate income, right, and they're struggling financially, to actually start making some positive changes.
So if you were to leave with one thing that you want people to think about MoneyMap, what would that be?
I think that human financial advice makes a big difference. And we've seen that in the research that we've done, and that it doesn't have to be expensive. The way that we do this is, API level pricing, where each time someone does something discrete, right, then that's a cost, but it's not $300 for an engagement, right? Like we can bring that down to a much, much, much lower price point for advice, where then it makes sense for someone to be able to do it. And I think advice is valuable, and it does a lot of the things that companies want to get done, as well as what their customers want to accomplish.
Well, fantastic. Well, Matt, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to seeing you at the next Finovate.
Yes.
And again, this is William Mills at Finovate Spring in San Francisco.